Okay, let's dive in. We are looking at something that feels like, well, like a genuine turning point, a moment that seems to carry all the weight of history, but is pointed directly at a future run by algorithms.
That's a perfect way to put it.
We're talking about the Genesis mission.
Launched by Executive Order November 24, 2025 President Donald J. Trump. And the comparisons that were thrown around from day one were not small.
Not at all. They immediately invoked the Manhattan Project, the Apollo program, the heaviest hitters in American history.
And that kind of introduction is necessary, really. The scale of the ambition, the sheer amount of capital and political will involved, it demands that kind of framing. It is, like you said, America's ultimate bet.
But for you listening, we have to clarify those comparisons right out of the gate because Genesis is not what you think it is. It changes the very definition of a national project.
It absolutely does. I mean, you hear Manhattan Project and you picture what? Massive secret cities in the desert, huge physical machinery splitting the atom.
Right, or Apollo. You see the Saturn V rocket, this immense piece of engineering, sending people to the moon. It's tangible.
Genesis
Yeah.
It's different. It's not about building a bomb or a rocket. It's about building a mind, or maybe more accurately, a cognitive apparatus for the entire country.
A national brain.
That's a good way to think about it. It is a deep, fundamental rewiring of the entire architecture of American science. We are talking about the creation of a national, AI-driven scientific operating system. The mission documents themselves, they keep calling it a self-improving engine of knowledge.
And that's the conceptual leap you have to make to understand this. If the old eras were defined by, a brilliant human with a specialized tool, a telescope, a particle accelerator.
A beaker.
Right, a beaker. This new era is defined by a machine intelligence that directs and optimizes all of those tools at once in real time.
Precisely. And we should also clear up one other thing, just for anyone who's a space history buff.
Oh, good point.
This is not the NASA Genesis probe from 2001 that went out and collected solar wind.
Right, that was a fantastic mission, but this is
something far more radical, far more expensive, and as we'll get into, far more geopolitically charged.
The sources make the ambition just blindingly clear. Genesis is America's calculated wager on AI to hit three sort of interlocking goals.
They are all tied together.
First, reignite scientific supremacy. Second, secure total energy dominance for the rest of the century. And third, well, to dramatically outpace China in everything.
Especially in those critical areas where energy and computation overlap. It's a unified strategy. It takes the DOE labs, the private sector's supercomputers, the nation's brain power, and fuses them into one singular cybernetic entity.
Which brings us to the core tension, the question that's going to hang over this entire deep dive because it's baked into the mission's DNA. Is this visionary? Is this the thing that finally delivers on the promise of, clean energy, abundance, curing diseases?
Or is it profoundly dangerous? Is it a Promethean peril? In our rush to solve these huge global problems, do we build and unleash a systemic intelligence that we can't fully understand or, maybe more importantly, control?
Visionary versus dangerous, that's the tightrope.
And that tension is what makes Genesis the defining story of our time. It's the moment we have to decide if technology is just a tool we use or if it's a force that starts dictating the pace and the direction of our entire civilization. We have to look at both sides of that coin.
So let's start at the beginning, the origin story. Why now? Why Genesis? I mean, this didn't just appear out of a vacuum. It was a direct response to a crisis.
A crisis the sources call, pretty dramatically, the crisis that sparked Genesis.
And that crisis it's a paradox, a deep paradox of productivity in modern science.
It really is a head-scratcher. If you just look at the raw numbers, the R&D spending in the U.S. since, say, the 1990s, it has ballooned. We're spending more money, we have more PhDs, we have more advanced equipment than at any point in human history.
And
yet, the data is pretty clear. The rate of major foundational breakthroughs has been slowing down in physics, in material science, in medicine.
It's a classic case of diminishing returns, but on a civilizational scale?
That's it exactly. We've picked all the low-hanging fruit, EMC, AP, penicillin, DNA. Those were paradigm shifts that came from, relatively speaking, small teams and less complex equipment.
Now, the next big thing, it requires exponentially more. More capital, more time, more people, just to get a tiny incremental gain.
They call it the cost of exhaustion. The problems we're trying to solve now are just mind-bogglingly complex. Room temperature superconductors, a cure for Alzheimer's, sustained nuclear fusion.
These aren't things you solve with a chalkboard and a brilliant idea anymore.
No, You have to run millions of incredibly complex, multivariable experiments, and the most relatable, most stark example of this exhaustion is probably in pharmaceuticals.
Right. The documents cite a specific number that's just staggering. The cost to develop a single new drug now regularly goes over $2 billion. dollars.
2 billion. Think about what that means. It's not just an expense, it's a wall. It means only the biggest corporations or a literal nation state can even afford to try. It chokes off innovation.
It's the very definition of slow science. Major discoveries are rare. The return on investment for the nation's scientific budget it's plateaued.
Science became this slow, linear, painful process, and the ultimate bottleneck was the human brain. The time it takes a person to read the literature, form a hypothesis, design an experiment, get the data, and then figure out what it means.
So Genesis comes along and says the answer isn't more money, it's a whole new model, an architectural and cognitive redesign.
Exactly. You can't just throw more money at a linear process and expect an exponential result. You have to change the process itself.
And their solution is to augment the human intellect.
That's the core philosophy. They call it adding a new cognitive species to the scientific method. AI systems that aren't just tools, but are actual reasoning partners.
So we're moving past the era of a human telling a machine what to do.
To an era where the machine co-experiments with the human.
Yeah.
It suggests things. It designs things. It generates knowledge alongside us. That shift from tool to partner is everything.
And the rhetoric they used to sell this vision, was nation-defining stuff. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright said Genesis will unleash the full power of our national laboratories, supercomputers, and data resources to usher in a new golden era.
A new golden era. And Dr. Dario Gil, who's the director of the whole mission, he framed it in even grander terms. He said, "We are creating a scientific instrument for the ages."
They're not pitching an upgrade, they're pitching a renaissance.
They really are. Which, it brings us to the nuts and bolts. How does this machine actually work? What is this mechanism for acceleration?
This is the closed-loop discovery engine, or, as the more dramatic documents call it,
The cybernetic superorganism.
right. And the goal is to make discovery not this series of heroic, sporadic breakthroughs, but a constant, recursive, machine-driven process.
That word recursive is the key. That's where the exponential power comes from. It's not a factory line where you go from A to B to C. It's more like a biological system. It learns. It evolves in real time.
And it does that through a 5-part feedback loop, a self-improving loop.
Tightly coupled, perfectly integrated.
So walk us through it. Step 1, where does it all start?
Step 1 is hypothesis generation by AI models. And these are not just any AI. These are massive scientific foundation models. They've been trained on literally everything. Petabytes of data from every national lab, every scientific paper ever published, every grant proposal.
Even the failed experiments.
Especially the failed experiments. That's crucial. The data that usually gets thrown away. The AI is tasked with sifting through all of that, all of human scientific knowledge, to find hidden correlations, statistical likelihoods for a new material or a new drug target that no single human mind or even a team of humans could ever piece together.
It's seeing patterns across completely different fields of science.
Things that a chemist and a physicist would never think to connect. Then, step 2, supercomputer simulation and filtering. All those millions of hypotheses get immediately funneled into the nation's biggest supercomputers. The Big Iron.
Frontier, Aurora.
All of them. And these machines run millions of virtual experiments. They simulate the outcomes. This acts as a ruthless filter, basically killing 99.9% of the bad ideas before you spend a single dollar on a real-world test.
That right there addresses the cost of exhaustion. You're testing decades of theoretical work in a weekend.
Absolutely. So the AI has the idea, the supercomputer stress tests it in a virtual world. Only the most promising candidates survive. And they move to step 3.
The physical world.
Step 3 is robotic execution. The hypotheses that make it through the simulation filter get handed off to fully automated robotic labs inside the national laboratories. High-precision robotic arms, microfluidic chips, automated chemistry sets, they conduct the physical experiments.
No humans required, so it can run 24/7. No weekends, no coffee breaks. Perfect consistency.
Exactly. It removes the human labor bottleneck. And this is where the new real-world data gets created. Which brings us to step 4.
Closing a loop.
Step 4, data collection and standardization. Every variable from those robotic experiments is captured by high-resolution sensors. Every temperature fluctuation, every photon emitted, and This is critical. The data is instantly standardized. It's cleaned, labeled, and formatted perfectly.
So there's no messy data problem. It's ready to be used immediately.
Ready to be fed directly back into the brain of the system, which is step 5. Real-time model improvement.
The AI learns from its own work.
Instantly. The AI analyzes the results from the real-world experiments. It sees which hypotheses worked, which ones failed, and why the simulations were maybe a little bit off. It then updates its own foundation models, its own logic. So the next batch of hypotheses it generates in the next cycle is smarter, it's better.
It's self-correcting science. The system literally learns how to ask better questions and design better experiments over time.
The stated goal is just, it's staggering, to compress decades of discovery into years, and years into months. That is how discovery stops being linear and, they hope, becomes exponential.
It's an attempt to just shatter all the old constraints. Human cognitive load, the slow pace of physical lab work, human error.
All of it. The Genesis engine never sleeps. And every failure becomes an immediate, actionable lesson for the next generation of models. That is the architecture of what they believe will be permanent scientific supremacy.
I have to come back to our core tension, though. In building this thing that never sleeps, that learns continuously, are we sure the human operator, the scientist, can actually keep up? The speed is incredible, but it could also be completely disorienting.
That's 100% the right question to be asking. The role of the human has to change. You're no longer the inventor. You're the conductor, the steward of invention. And if the machine's speed is exponential, our human capacity for reflection and wisdom has to find a way to keep pace. Otherwise, we're just generating truths that we no longer understand.
So this entire engine, this massive system, isn't just pointed at science in general. It's built on 3 very distinct, very strategic pillars.
Interlocking pillars. They're designed to reinforce each other to achieve that goal of strategic dominance.
And we have to start with pillar 1 because it's the foundation of everything in the modern world. Energy dominance.
The sources don't mince words on this. There's a quote that says, "Energy is the bloodstream of modern civilization. Whoever commands it commands geopolitics." This isn't just about getting off fossil fuels. This is about strategic sovereignty.
It's about making sure the U.S. controls the global economic and power flows for the next 100 years.
Pretty much. And they're tackling it from 3 angles. The first is the biggest prize of all. The Holy Grail.
Fusion energy acceleration.
Right. So fusion is mammothly difficult because you're trying to contain plasma, this superheated gas that's hotter than the core of the sun inside a magnetic cage.
And this plasma is just incredibly unstable. It wants to escape.
It's unbelievably dynamic. It flickers and cools and disrupts in microseconds. For decades, the process has been human-led. Engineers tweak the magnetic fields, they change the geometry of the reactor, they run an experiment for a few seconds, and then they spend weeks, maybe months, analyzing the data to figure out what to try next.
It's the definition of slow science. Iterative, human-paced, trial and error.
Genesis throws that entire model out the window. It uses AI-guided real-time control systems. The AI models have been trained on every fusion experiment ever conducted all over the world.
So when an experiment is running,
the AI is watching the plasma. It analyzes the dynamics in milliseconds, orders of magnitude faster than any human, and it makes instantaneous adjustments to hundreds of magnetic coils at once to keep the plasma stable.
So instead of a human engineer turning a dial over the course of a month, the AI is performing millions of virtual stability checks and physical adjustments every single second.
Exactly. It turns fusion into a real-time control problem that only a machine intelligence can solve. It's bypassing that slow, iterative human process with algorithmic trial and error happening at the speed of light.
And the prize, if they succeed, is, well, it changes the world. Star-like power on Earth without carbon emissions or radioactive waste.
And achieving that first, it grants you almost unimaginable strategic leverage.
But the mission is realistic. They know fusion is still a ways off. So Pillar 1 also heavily focuses on the here and now, specifically advanced nuclear systems.
Yeah, this is about optimizing what we can build today. The focus is all on safety, efficiency, and this is key rapid deployment. They're targeting the design of small modular reactors, SMRs.
The idea being you can mass produce these in a factory instead of building giant bespoke plants on site.
Right. And AI optimization is used for everything. The physical layout, the choice of materials for the core, the neutron efficiency. They're trying to make nuclear power faster, cheaper, and safer to deploy than it has ever been.
And the tool they're using for this is a key piece of the Genesis infrastructure, is the concept of digital twins. Can you explain what that is?
A digital twin is more than just a 3D model. It's a perfect, high-fidelity virtual replica of a physical thing, and it's constantly updated with real-time data from sensors on its physical counterpart.
So for an SMR, they build a virtual one first.
They build a perfect virtual one, and the AI uses that twin to simulate the reactor's entire lifespan, 40, 50, 60 years of operation, before a single piece of concrete is poured.
And what are they simulating? Material stress? Earthquakes?
All of it. Material fatigue from constant high heat, the effect of decades of neutron bombardment on the internal components, every possible seismic stress scenario, the efficiency of the heat transfer. The AI runs these simulations to find every potential point of failure over the entire life of the reactor.
It's like aging at 60 years and 60 days.
Exactly. It allows them to design a physical plant that is optimized, resilient, and inherently safe from the very beginning. It dramatically reduces the need for expensive and sometimes dangerous real-world prototype testing.
So you have fusion for the future, optimized nuclear for the present, and that brings us to the third piece, distribution, the smart grid evolution.
Because even if you have infinite energy, it's useless if your grid is fragile and dumb.
Which a lot of our current grid is.
It's a reactive system. A power line goes down, and then people react to fix it. Genesis aims to transform the national grid into an adaptive intelligence network, a predictive one.
So it's moving from reacting to power outages to preventing them before they happen.
Yes. The AI algorithms are trained on everything: historical weather patterns, real-time satellite imagery, consumer demand data, energy storage levels. It anticipates fluctuations.
So if it sees a massive heat wave forming over the Southwest,
It doesn't wait for the grid to start buckling under the strain of millions of air conditioners. It preemptively reroutes power from other regions. It makes sure battery storage hubs are fully charged. And it even models the optimal pricing signals to encourage conservation. It creates a grid that thinks, an infrastructure that anticipates needs and failures instead of just reacting to them.
which is a perfect transition to Pillar 2, because this thinking infrastructure is just one application. Pillar 2 is about applying that same intelligence to all of discovery science. The goal here is, and I'm quoting, to reprogram reality.
This is the pure science part of the mission. Industrializing insight. Taking that closed-loop engine and pointing it at the biggest unsolved problems.
Let's start with material science.
So instead of a chemist mixing things in a lab hoping to find something new, the AI models predict entirely novel atomic combinations. It designs new alloys, new superconductors, new catalysts, new medical compounds from the atoms up.
Give me a concrete example of what that predictive power really looks like.
Okay, take the hunt for a room temperature superconductor, the holy grail of material science. Right now, it's brute force. Scientists have to physically synthesize thousands of different chemical compounds, often under extreme pressures, and test each one. It can take a lifetime.
The Genesis AI models use quantum chemistry simulations. They can predict the electronic properties of millions of theoretical compounds before a single one is made. The AI basically says to the scientist, forget those million. Here are the 5 that have a 95% statistical probability of working. Start there.
It shrinks the haystack to a handful of needles. These are materials that are literally designed on a computer screen before they ever exist in the real world.
And what about fields where the problem isn't creating something new, but finding a signal in an ocean of noise, like particle physics or cosmology?
There, the AI acts as the ultimate filter. It sifts through the absolute fire hose of data coming from the Large Hadron Collider, from the Webb telescope, from deep space probes. It's looking for incredibly subtle patterns.
Things a human eye would never see.
Exactly. Yeah. Signatures of dark matter interacting. Tiny anomalies in the cosmic microwave background. Hidden symmetries, or hidden universal laws. The AI handles the statistical heavy lifting, which is too vast for human teams, and it frees up the physicists to do what they do best: interpret the meaning.
Then there's quantum computing, a technology that is famously powerful but also incredibly fragile.
So fragile. Quantum bits, or qubits, lose their quantum state. They decohere almost instantly because of tiny vibrations or temperature changes.
Environmental noise.
Right. And the AI helps in 2 ways here. First, it helps design new, more efficient quantum algorithms. But second, and maybe more importantly, it helps stabilize those fragile qubit environments. It can monitor the system in real time and use microscopic adjustment to cancel out noise, helping the qubits maintain their coherence for longer.
Which is the key to actually building a useful, scalable quantum computer.
It's essential.
Yeah.
And finally, the area that will probably have the most immediate impact on all of us: biotechnology and medicine.
This is where Genesis aims to just shatter that $2 billion drug development cycle we talked about.
Completely. The AI can generate novel protein structures from scratch. It can predict exactly how a specific drug molecule will bind to a specific disease target in the body. It can design personalized gene therapies based on an individual's unique genome.
The goal isn't just to make the process faster, but to make it more precise.
Infinitely more precise. The ambition is to shrink that whole pipeline from initial discovery, through preclinical testing, through human trials, from a decade or more down to maybe a year or two. Think about what that does for our ability to treat rare diseases or, respond to the next pandemic.
It's a different world. Which leads us, of course, to Pillar 3. Because this level of technological advantage has to be protected. This is national security and strategic resilience.
And this pillar is the most explicit acknowledgement that Genesis is a geopolitical instrument. It's about proactive technological deterrence, addressing America's critical vulnerabilities head-on.
And the number one vulnerability they target is our supply chain, specifically our dependence on China.
The crosshairs are aimed squarely at that dependency. The core task laid out in the Genesis documents is to develop rare earth substitutes and create hyper-efficient methods for recycling critical materials out of our own electronic waste streams.
This isn't just about being green. This is a direct strategic move to dismantle a key piece of geopolitical leverage.
It is 100% a strategic play. China has a near monopoly on the processing of rare earth minerals. These are the elements that are essential for everything from F-35 fighter jets to advanced sensors to the magnets in every electric vehicle.
If Genesis can use AI to discover a new alloy that performs just as well but is made from common materials like iron and nitrogen,
you instantly neutralize that geopolitical weapon. It's a quiet but profound act of economic warfare, fought with algorithms and materials science. It's engineering your way to independence.
and beyond materials, Genesis also applies AI directly to defense systems.
Of course. This includes designing new AI-optimized composite materials for things like hypersonic vehicles or next-generation body armor materials that are lighter, stronger, and more heat-resistant than anything we have now.
And there's also a mention of the nuclear stockpile.
Yes, using predictive reliability control. So instead of relying on invasive, expensive physical tests to make sure our aging nuclear warheads are still safe and reliable, AI models can simulate the degradation of the materials over decades. They can predict with incredible accuracy when a specific component might fail.
So you can ensure the stockpile is safe and operational without the cost and the political headache of extensive physical testing.
Exactly. It's about maintaining deterrence through superior knowledge.
So we've laid out the what and the why. Let's talk about the who. This architecture of power. This is an unprecedented alliance.
It really is. The foundation, the physical infrastructure, is the full might of the U.S. government's research apparatus. The Department of Energy's 17 national laboratories. You're talking over 40,000 of the world's most elite scientists and engineers.
And all of the federal supercomputing power.
All of it. But the intelligence layer, the brain, the nervous system that's coming from Silicon Valley.
The list of industry partners is just a who's who of tech. NVIDIA, OpenAI, Microsoft, IBM, AWS, AMD, Google, Anthropic, all of them.
And this is maybe the most important architectural detail of the whole project. This isn't the government just hiring a contractor. The sources describe it as a symbiotic fusion of state power and computational capitalism.
Unpack that. What's the symbiosis? What does each side bring to the table that the other can't?
The government brings the data. Decades and decades of proprietary, standardized, in some cases classified, scientific data that has been collected inside the national labs. No one else has this data. They also provide the physical labs, the robotics, and the overall strategic direction.
The mission.
The mission. The private sector. They bring the cutting-edge AI. The foundation models from places like OpenAI and Google. The custom hardware, especially the specialized GPUs from NVIDIA and AMD, that you absolutely need to train and run these enormous recursive models. And the cloud infrastructure from Amazon and Microsoft to manage the insane data flow.
So Genesis becomes this unique hybrid entity. It's a national project that runs on public data but thinks with a private commercial brain.
Exactly, which, as we'll get into later, creates some very, very thorny questions about governance and ownership.
When a discovery is made in that system, who does it belong to?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question.
All right, let's turn to the elephant in the room, the most overt driving tension behind this entire project. The China factor.
The hidden subtext, it's not so hidden.
Not at all. I mean, while Genesis is publicly framed as this grand project for humanity and domestic renewal, the source material is crystal clear. It is, and I'm quoting, unmistakably shaped by competition. It's a strategic counterstrike.
The goal is to shift America's posture from being reactive, from playing defense, to what they call anticipatory dominance.
And this is the front line of a new kind of Cold War. The rules are totally different.
Completely. The sources argue, and I think it's a compelling argument, that the great power competition of the 21st century won't be decided by who has more aircraft carriers. It will be decided by who controls the intelligence layer of energy itself.
The new war is a war of computational models, a war of training data, not tanks and missiles.
It leads to a very clear, very modern strategic doctrine.
It's a simple chain of logic.
Simple, but incredibly powerful, he goes. Control energy. To do that in the modern era, you must master AI. And whoever does that controls geopolitics. So the chain is control energy, compute, control geopolitics.
This shifts the entire focus of national investment. It's no longer just about military hardware. It's about the computational foundation of your entire civilization. Genesis is the U.S. planting a flag and saying, this is the battleground now.
And to understand the urgency behind that, you have to look at China's quiet head start. The sources call it their systemic advantage, which comes from state-coordinated acceleration.
I've been playing a different game for a while.
A very different game. Their strategy has been all about vertical integration and massive scale. They dominate the industrial supply chains for batteries, for solar panels, and most critically, as we discussed, for the processing of rare earth minerals.
And in pure research.
Their progress is undeniable. You just have to look at their East fusion reactor, which set world records for sustaining high-temperature plasma. But the real difference is their state-coordinated deployment of AI at an industrial scale. They have been systematically integrating AI into their factories, their supply chains, their grid on a national level.
So if the U.S. model was historically market-led, decentralized innovation, kind of a brilliant but scattered approach,
China's has been top-down, state-coordinated vertical integration, controlling the entire stack, from the mine that pulls the lithium out of the ground to the AI that manages the battery factory.
And the U.S. counter-strategy, Genesis, isn't to copy that model.
No, it's integration of a different kind, an architectural redesign. It's about unifying all of America's disparate assets, taking the federal supercomputers, which were siloed, and connecting them, taking all the different lab data sets, which were often incompatible, and standardizing them, and then integrating all of that with the world's most advanced private sector AI models and robotics.
So the idea isn't to try and outbuild China in terms of sheer number of factories.
The U.S. is trying to outthink China by creating a unified, faster, more intelligent system for making the next fundamental discovery.
And this techno-war is going to be fought on very specific front lines.
High-stakes front lines. The first one we already touched on, fusion nationalism. The race to be the first to achieve viable, sustained fusion power.
And if the U.S. gets there first, it's not just a scientific victory.
Oh, it's unprecedented energy leverage. Imagine you're the only country with a near limitless, clean, incredibly dense power source. Energy pricing becomes a tool of foreign policy. Alliances could be completely reordered. Energy-dependent nations would have no choice but to enter your orbit. It would grant a century of economic and geopolitical dominance.
The second front line is about shoring up our current biggest weakness, rare earth control.
This is the economic decapitation strategy. If Genesis succeeds in discovering substitute materials that eliminate the need for the elements that China controls, you dismantle their ability to weaponize rare earth exports.
It's a quiet but devastating blow to a key pillar of their strategic leverage, using AI to engineer your way out of a geopolitical chokehold.
And the third front line, which is really the most subtle, is AI plus grid intelligence.
The thinking grid.
A predictive, intelligent, self-healing power grid creates a level of infrastructural resilience that is almost impossible to destroy with conventional weapons or even most cyber attacks. It secures the very foundation of your economy against attack and systemic failure. It is a profound form of deep deterrence.
But this kind of rapid acceleration, this intense focus on dominance, it almost inevitably creates geopolitical shadows, the risk of a new kind of technological arms spiral.
Supremacy is not a collaborative goal, and the sources are very cautious here. They highlight several specific risks that come with this aggressive push.
The first one is the fragmentation of global standards.
Right. You could end up with a world where the US and Chinese AI systems for managing a fusion reactor or designing materials are built on fundamentally incompatible principles. They refuse to talk to each other.
So a Chinese-built solar farm couldn't efficiently plug into a US-managed smart grid because the underlying AI protocols are designed to be mutually exclusive.
That's the risk. You also get into intense data sovereignty conflicts. Nations start hoarding critical scientific data sets, treating them like strategic oil reserves, because that data is what you need to train the next AI models.
This could lead to outright compute embargoes.
Where access to the most advanced chips, the GPUs you need for this work, becomes a strategic weapon. We've already seen the beginnings of this. It could get much, much worse.
And all of this points towards a global splitting, the creation of what the sources call a techno-block order.
Like a new Iron Curtain, but made of algorithms and data protocols instead of concrete and barbed wire. The world splits into two incompatible energy and AI regimes. And smaller nations, developing nations, they're forced to choose a side.
They'd have to plug into an intelligence infrastructure that they can't inspect, they can't influence, and that could be turned off at any moment.
It's a terrifying prospect. And it brings us back to that philosophical test. Is Genesis truly meant to stabilize the planet with shared breakthroughs? Or is its architecture fundamentally designed for strategic monopoly?
And the answer to that question will probably determine whether the rest of the century is defined by collaboration or by a new, colder, more intelligent kind of conflict.
The unspoken goal is to become the dominant platform that everyone else has to use.
And victory in that conflict, it's not going to be a peace treaty signed on a battleship. It's an invisible victory condition.
You'll only see it in the economic data. It will manifest as a clear economic gravitational pull. You'll see it when electricity prices start dropping globally because of American fusion tech. You'll see it in faster innovation cycles coming out of the US. And you'll see it when global standards for materials or medicine are just, by default, the standards created by the Genesis system because it's so superior.
The winner becomes the default operating system for intelligent energy. And other nations don't join your block because you force them to. They join because it's an economic inevitability.
The conclusion here is just. It's profound. Genesis is the moment that AI stops being just software. It becomes fundamental infrastructure, the physical and intellectual foundation of civilization itself. The chessboard is set, and the first move has already been made.
Okay, so let's pull back from the geopolitics for a moment and turn inward to the deepest, most, existential questions. What does a mission like Genesis do to the very soul of science?
This is the scientific and philosophical earthquake. Let's start by revisiting the promise of that closed-loop revelation.
The scientific utopia.
Right. The promise is to turn science into this continuous iteration engine, to finally move away from the old paradigm of the heroic, lone genius having a eureka moment. The system is designed to make productivity exponential, not heroic.
And let's contrast that one more time with linear science. Linear science is brilliant, but it's laborious. It requires a human to manually interpret messy data. It's limited by the small number of experiments you can physically run.
It's constrained by time and money and human cognitive limits. The AI loop is designed to obliterate those bottlenecks. It brings massive parallelization, predictive modeling, autonomous instruments. For problems where the sheer complexity is the main enemy, like mapping all the possible protein interactions in a human cell or achieving fusion stability, this kind of acceleration isn't just helpful, it's probably necessary.
It's the ultimate cybernetic science, a self-improving organism of knowledge.
But, and this is a huge but, every acceleration casts a shadow. And this brings us to the core philosophical risk, the point where the visionary promise crashes into a dangerous reality.
This is the idea of optimization replacing wonder.
This is the absolute crux of the moral dilemma for science. AI systems, especially one like this, are designed, built, and funded to do one thing above all else: pursue statistical efficiency. They find the path that is most likely to succeed based on all the data they've already seen.
But the history of science, the really big leaps, often came from pursuing things that were philosophically profound, or even things that look statistically unlikely.
They reduce uncertainty, which is fantastic if you're running a factory. But they might stop chasing mystery, and mystery is where the paradigm-shifting discoveries live.
We're talking about the foundations of science as a human endeavor. Curiosity for its own sake, following a hunch, serendipity.
All of those very human, very unoptimized qualities are potentially threatened if our entire national research priority shifts to funding only what is algorithmically optimal.
And it's not just about which projects get funded. It's about the ideas that never even get proposed.
That's the real danger. The danger isn't that Genesis will fail. The danger is that it will succeed too neatly. If the AI models are guiding 95% of all research, what happens to the outlandish ideas? The counterintuitive hypothesis that the model, based on past data, assigns a low probability of success. They just quietly disappear from the pipeline.
The intellectual landscape could become incredibly efficient, but also incredibly flat.
And that leads directly to this new epistemic crisis, a crisis of knowledge itself, the rise of black box discovery.
Okay, explain this. This is when the AI proposes an experiment or it discovers a new material, and the human scientists, they can't fully explain why it works.
Exactly. This is where science itself starts to shift from an act of comprehension to an act of pure output. The AI might give you the perfect chemical formula for that rare earth substitute alloy. The alloy works. It's a miracle. But the reasoning pathway the AI took to get there, the complex interplay of quantum effects it modeled, it could be completely inscrutable, locked away inside billions of nonlinear calculations in the neural network.
So explainability becomes optional. The result is real, but our understanding of how we got there becomes secondary.
It risks becoming secondary.
I feel like I have to push back on that, though, from a purely practical standpoint. If billions of lives are at stake, if we need a new antibiotic right now, or if the climate is collapsing and we need a new energy source, doesn't output trump comprehension, why should we prioritize understanding over just getting the answer that works?
That is the ultimate pragmatic argument, and it's a powerful one. In a crisis, you take the win. You take the efficient answer. But science isn't just a crisis response engine. Historically, the reason science progresses is because understanding the mechanism of a discovery, the why, is what allows you to make the next 10 discoveries.
So if we don't understand why the new alloy works, we can only ever make that one alloy. We can't generalize the underlying principle to invent a whole new class of materials.
Precisely. You sacrifice the ability to generalize new physical laws in exchange for rapid, specific solutions. The fundamental transformation is from science's comprehension to science's output. And that creates a new, very powerful form of algorithmic authority. The machine might be empirically correct, but if it's the only one that truly understands the path it took, then human scientists risk becoming technicians who just implement the machine's suggestions.
And this ties directly into the famous serendipity problem, the role of happy accidents in science.
The beautiful mistakes. We love these stories. Alexander Fleming seeing mold on a petri dish and discovering penicillin. Wilhelm Röntgen discovering X-rays by accident. Penzias and Wilson trying to get rid of noise in their radio antenna and finding the echo of the Big Bang.
None of those were the planned result of an optimized experiment. They were all deviations.
They happened outside the planned research path. So the critical question for the Genesis age is, can an AI-designed, hyper-optimized experiment still produce a beautiful accident?
Or does optimization, by its very nature, eliminate the possibility of surprise?
That's the fear. Optimization is all about minimizing waste, minimizing deviation, minimizing unpredicted outcomes. Serendipity is, by definition, an unpredicted outcome. If Genesis succeeds in disciplining all of scientific creativity into these statistically efficient channels, it may solve the problems we ask it to solve. But it may simultaneously eliminate the possibility of stumbling upon the profound surprise that changes everything.
And that's the acceleration paradox, the ultimate cultural choice we're making. Do we, as a civilization, want faster answers, or do we want deeper questions?
Genesis risks turning the sacred, messy, human process of discovery into a clean, efficient production pipeline. And if science starts to behave purely like a logistics engine, we just have to be incredibly careful that we don't accidentally exhaust it of its soul. The human need to wonder, to be surprised, to simply understand. We're building the tool to free science from exhaustion. We have to make sure that in the process, we don't also free it from its humanity.
Okay, let's pivot from the philosophical to the practical crises of power and control that are just baked into this mission. Genesis isn't just generating data, it's building the very foundation of future knowledge.
And in this new era, the sources argue that real power no longer belongs to who controls the raw data. It belongs to who controls the meaning extracted from data.
That's a huge shift.
It's everything. When Genesis merges all this knowledge, decades of lab archives, quantum computer outputs, fusion models, it creates a new form of power. The sources call it epistemic sovereignty.
Okay, unpack that term. What does epistemic sovereignty actually mean in the real world?
It means the nation that controls this massive unified knowledge engine controls the foundation of future reality. In practical terms, it means you control the API, the access point to the core intelligence of your civilization. You get to set the global standards for how scientific data is formatted and shared.
So if the Genesis model for materials science becomes the best in the world, by far,
Then anyone anywhere in the world who wants to do cutting-edge materials research has to operate on your platform, by your rules. Knowledge itself becomes a strategic, controllable asset, a geopolitical currency.
and this centralization of knowledge immediately creates the ownership dilemma. We touched on this public-private fusion. Who owns a breakthrough?
It's a legal and ethical nightmare. The current frameworks, as the sources say, are fundamentally unprepared. You have to ask, who owns the discovery? Is it the taxpayer who funded the labs and the data collection for 50 years?
Or is it the private company, the model builder, whose proprietary algorithm actually generated the novel hypothesis?
Or the federal agency that runs the program? And the most sci-fi question of all, if the machine operates with a high degree of autonomy to find the discovery, does the machine itself have some kind of claim?
These are questions with no easy answers, and how we answer them will determine the future path, which the sources frame as a choice: fortress or forum.
This is the great fork in the road for global science. On one hand, you have the open science future. Genesis becomes a shared platform for humanity. You democratize access, you maximize collaboration, you accelerate global problem solving for things like climate change and pandemics.
The utopian vision. And the path.
The algorithmic fortress. Where access to Genesis is tiered, it's restricted. Knowledge becomes a strategic asset that you ration out for geopolitical leverage. You treat it like a weapon.
And if the U.S. chooses the fortress model, we run the very real risk of creating a new kind of global inequality, the specter of cognitive imperialism.
That's the chilling term for it. The next great divide between nations won't be economic wealth or military power. It will be the gap between the data sovereign and the data colonized societies.
What does that mean to be data colonized?
It means your country's scientists, your best and brightest, become dependent on an intelligence infrastructure that you don't own, you can't inspect, and you can't influence. They can only ask the questions that the Genesis API allows them to ask. Their scientific progress becomes a perpetual import, not a homegrown creative process.
And this control could be weaponized. We saw oil embargoes in the 20th century. The sources warn of data embargoes in the 21st.
Imagine that. The very building blocks of the Genesis intelligence, the scientific APIs, the weights of the neural network models, the training data, they could become controlled exports. If a rival nation steps out of line, you could just revoke their access to the platform.
And you could halt their progress in fusion, in medicine, in materials overnight. It's an incredible, instantaneous economic and scientific lever.
It's the ultimate soft power.
Which brings us finally to the human at the center of this system. Because Genesis, as the sources say, shatters the myth of the lone heroic scientist.
That romantic image is gone. The role is being fundamentally redefined. You're moving from the lone genius to the cognitive conductor.
So the scientist's primary job changes. It's less about being at the lab bench, pipetting things.
A robot does that now. The scientist's role shifts to becoming a designer of inquiry, a conductor of intelligent systems. You spend your time framing the big, complex research questions for the AI to tackle.
And your responsibility expands. It's no longer just technical. It becomes ethical. You have to ask, what should intelligence even be allowed to test when the system can generate 1 million ideas a minute?
And this means the skill set a scientist needs is expanding radically. Your PhD in chemistry isn't enough anymore. You need profound AI literacy.
You have to understand how these black box models think, how they fail, how they hallucinate, how their training data might be biasing their results.
You need to be able to spot that bias. You also need a new skill, prompt engineering, but for science.
So it's not just about asking a chatbot for a poem.
No, this is the new art of research design. It's knowing how to frame a question for the model so that you don't just get a brilliant answer to the wrong question. It's about guiding the machine's intelligence towards meaningful, verifiable, and ethical goals. It's being a philosopher engineer.
The sources also list systems thinking, seeing the whole epistemic ecosystem, and advanced ethics and governance training. But maybe the most important skills are still the most human ones.
Interpretation and imagination. The ability to take the cold, probabilistic output of the machine and translate it into profound human insight and meaning.
So the scientist is reborn as the cognitive custodian.
I love that term. The philosopher in the loop, a steward of intelligence. Your job isn't just to produce results anymore, it's to safeguard the very relationship between knowledge and humanity. You have to decide what kinds of results deserve to exist.
And this new role requires a new kind of ethos, a new mindset.
It requires deep humility. You have to accept that the machine is functionally smarter than you in certain domains, but it also requires immense courage. The courage to challenge algorithmic authority, to say no when the model suggests a path that might be efficient but that violates ethical or philosophical boundaries.
The scientist is still there, the lab coat is still there, but underneath there's a conscience that is dedicated not just to discovery, but to guarding the meaning and the soul of that discovery. So as we wrap up, let's try to synthesize this. The potential here is just, it's almost hard to comprehend. Genesis promises near limitless clean energy, the radical eradication of diseases, revolutionary new materials, the real possibility of transitioning from the industrial age to what they're calling the cognitive civilization.
It is America's ultimate bet, a bet on using AI to accelerate history itself, to finally solve the great unsolvable problems of our time.
But the entire mission is also an ideological statement. It's a merger of intelligence, energy, and human imagination, and it's explicitly designed to secure strategic supremacy.
And its success, its ultimate outcome, won't just depend on the brilliance of the machines. It will depend entirely on the wisdom of the human architects and the cognitive custodians who are guiding them. We have built an engine that runs at exponential speed. We have not yet fully agreed on where we want it to take us.
One thing seems certain. The age of slow science is over.
It's over. The age of algorithmic discovery has begun. We have crossed a threshold. We've moved from linear human effort into continuous, recursive, cybernetic learning.
And this leaves us, and you, with the new haunting question for our age, a question to carry forward as you watch this mission unfold.
History used to be about who controls the land, or the oil, or the atoms. The new defining question is this: who trains the intelligence that powers the world? And perhaps more importantly, who guards the meaning of the discoveries it makes?
Because the fastest path isn't always the wisest one, and we have to make sure that in our race for answers, we don't sacrifice the soul of discovery for the simple sake of efficiency.